Okay, so now we have another 1 hour and a half. We'll try to keep it shorter also because it's not 2:30 p.m., right? So we already lost a little bit of time. A couple of questions that came out during the break. One, very important, what's the mapping between the groups in the lab and the schedule? But actually I have not been so clear, but if you go to the schedule, actually group 1 is the first lab, it is Squadra 1 in Italian, maybe there's the English as well. Anyway, one is in the first slot, the other is second slot, Squadra 2, okay? First slot, group 1, second slot, group 2, and third slot, group 3, okay? That's the basic assignment. I mean, very simple. As I told you, we don't really care if you go to 1, 2, or 3, as long as people fit in the room, okay? Because there's a security issue and so on. I mean, security in terms of, building security. I mean, in case something happens and we need to evacuate the rooms and so on, okay? Okay, so the other question was, yes, about this schedule, okay? Your colleague was asking, I think it got recorded, but we repeat it here now, so for clarity. I mean, we don't want you to be busy for days. I mean, we will have a schedule saying student ID number 123, Thursday 1 p.m. Okay, 2 p.m. maybe, one bedtime. And the other 2:20, the other 2:40, and so on. Okay, we'll try to keep the schedule. Of course, you never know exactly how long an oral exam lasts, so we might be a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. But I mean, our experience in the past is that more or less we keep the time. Okay, so of course you are welcome to come to listen to other exams in Italy. Italian university exams. Oral exams are public, so you can come and listen, okay, as long as, again, you fit in the room. But, I mean, typically it's not so many people, okay? But maybe listening to some oral exams is not so bad, okay? Even though you don't see the screen, but you listen to the question, the discussion, and so on, okay? So, you will have a date and the time assigned. We know we cannot satisfy everybody, but I mean, you can also write me an email, or even better, you can swap you with a colleague, another student, and for us it's perfectly fine, as long as we always have somebody that we can evaluate, okay? Okay, but we can discuss these things again when we approach the exam date, okay, the first exam date at least. Okay, so on the website you already find other slides, okay? There is this software installation instructions, okay? I will not go into many details here. I mean, just for your reference, I separated the slides from the introduction. Before, when you are in the lab, then you don't know where to find installation instructions, so they're just a block of slides just for this, okay? We will use one tool for the server side, and also in the beginning of the course, that is a JavaScript environment that is able to run JavaScript outside the browser, okay? At the end, that is what is going to happen on the server side. And this is called Node, and we invite you to install at least version 24, which is basically the latest version with long-term support. So they don't change it while we are carrying out the course. Okay? The developer tools, okay, for React, for later, and either integrated development environment. We suggest Visual Studio Code. It's reasonably lightweight, maybe not too much, but not too heavy, okay? And it can do everything we need, okay? So we think it's a good choice, and also from the past again for this course. Okay, it supports JavaScript natively, so no problem. These are installation instructions for Node. I think you can read them and check them and try to run them before the lab, which is not this week but next week. Okay? If you have any problems in the lab, we can try to address them. Okay? We cannot really, let's say, support any computer, any distribution, Linux distribution and so on, but I mean, we will try to do our best to help you to set up the system where you can work for this course. Okay, so just have a look at the slides for the part that you need. Okay, so now we start the course, and we will discuss these are the videos. I think here. We will start with the first topic for this course, which is of course JavaScript. Okay? We start from the language, because without the language we cannot do anything. Okay? And we just discussed, I just talked about Node. Node is an environment where JavaScript can run. Okay? And actually in this course we will only use JavaScript. Even though JavaScript was born to be run in the client, in the browser, we will use it for the server as well. Just because it's easier. We don't want to learn a second language just to develop a server. Okay? Maybe you already know, you know Python, you know PHP, you know Java, you know something. Okay? Here we just use JavaScript because it's easier. We just learn one language, and in the meanwhile we also practice JavaScript. Okay? And using libraries and so on. Okay? Okay, so basically we can run JavaScript everywhere. In the browser, there's native support. Any browser, any modern browser supports JavaScript, even those on your mobile phones. Okay? And if we are outside the browser, we need an environment where JavaScript can be run. And the environment we chose, that is a very common choice, is this Node.js. Okay? So, outline, okay, and what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a programming language, of course. It's nothing to do with Java, okay? So it's just a name. And actually, it was named JavaScript just for marketing reasons. And probably before you were born, okay? And note that the first version of JavaScript was written in 10 days, okay? So it means that it's not very well, I think, let's say designed. When, I mean, for instance, Python was much more well designed, okay? So a lot of fundamental language decisions were made because of company politics, so a lot of reasons which were not technical reasons. Okay, so maybe they were not so suitable, especially nowadays that the language is so widespread and so used in different contexts. Okay, and we need to cope with this situation. But in the meanwhile, you know, in the last years things have improved. Okay, and I think we are at a point at which, I mean, it's quite reasonable to use JavaScript for almost anything in web applications. Okay, this is the history of JavaScript. It was born 1995, so it's 30 years ago, right? By this guy. And there were a lot of versions. At a certain point, the development almost stopped. Okay, so here you see 10 years passed. Okay, before things were developed a little bit more significantly, I mean. This is the version we are targeting now. Okay, this ES6, which is from June 2015. It looks old. Okay, more than 10 years old, but actually it's not so old. I mean, the rest of the improvement that have been done in JavaScript are things that are not really fundamental. There are a few operators and syntax structures and so on that can be useful, and we will use them, so we'll not neglect the rest, okay? But basically what is supported nowadays by almost any JavaScript environment is this ES6. That's why it's so important, okay? Which is also named ES 2015 from the year. So this number is just the year +1. Okay? So a lot of versions. Note that the official name of JavaScript is this ECMAScript. That's the name of the standard. Okay? And who is developing JavaScript? Well, there's a technical committee, okay? This TC39, who is inside the committee? Well, all the major players in computer engineering, okay? Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, and so on, and other entities, foundations like Mozilla, etc. Okay? There is the standard. If you look around, I mean, there's a link and so on, but of course standards are unreadable, okay? They are just a reference in case you have a very specific doubt about how one thing that you don't find anywhere should be handled. Okay, that's the official information how to handle this aspect. But, I mean, of course we will not use it. We will just use, let's say, more accessible resources, and I show you some resources in the first set of slides at the end, okay? Mozilla Development Network and so on. We will see them when we need them during the course, okay? Sometimes we have a doubt, maybe you have a question, and we have a look at the documentation, but something more friendly than the standard. JavaScript needs an execution environment to run, okay? So it's not something that is compiled and it gives you some binary code that you can run on a specific hardware architecture, okay? It's an interpreted language, and so you need an interpreter to run it. And there are a few different interpreters nowadays, well, almost 3, okay? There's this V8 that is maintained by Google, which is in many browsers, including the Microsoft one. The SpiderMonkey, that is basically in Firefox, in this family of browsers, and the one by Apple. Okay? But I mean, we don't really care about these things just for context, for information purposes, because once they say they support ES6, so this version of JavaScript, that's enough for us. And almost every browser supports at least ES6. Okay? Maybe not really every single feature and so on, but for the purpose of our course, yes. Okay? So everything is supported. Okay? Just be aware of the fact that, I mean, people claim to be compliant and so on, but maybe there are specific issues and so on that are not really well supported or supported at all. But typically they are very small and specific characteristics that we don't really need to know, at least for the purpose of this course. Okay? Okay, just a few more words about JavaScript compatibility issues. A language that evolves, so as a different version, automatically creates an issue of compatibility. So what's the philosophy of JavaScript? JavaScript is always backward compatible. Okay? There's just a single discontinuity we'll talk about in a minute, the strict mode. Okay, but I mean, what is supported in a version will be supported in next versions of JavaScript. So it means if you write some piece of code that runs on ES6, it will run on ES7, 8, 9, 10, etc. Okay? And the committee that maintains JavaScript basically summarizes this characteristic in a nice way that says we don't break the web. Okay? So it means that you open a new browser, new version of the browser, support for a newer version of JavaScript, the whole website still runs because you don't need to change any part of the code. Okay? Okay. Of course, as any other language, it's not forward compatible because you cannot use new characteristics which are in the new version of the language in older version. But there is a trick, that's why we are mentioning it here, that there can be interpreter or say translators, better than interpreter, translators that can convert from new JavaScript syntax to older JavaScript syntax. Okay, so there is a new operator, let's say, in JavaScript. Okay, it's available only from ES8. Okay, we want to run it on ES6. There are automatic translators that can take this code and translate it into ES6 version. Okay, and this is valid also for functions that comes with a standard library. Any language has a standard library, maybe a bit smaller, a bit larger, like Java is very big standard library, C is small standard library, okay? But JavaScript has one, and sometimes there are characteristics which are added to the standard library, and there is a way with this polyfilling, so basically libraries that add new characteristics to the standard library that allows you to run newer version of the code, of JavaScript code on older version. I mean, an interpreter that support older version of JavaScript. Okay? There's just this point of discontinuity, which is the strict mode that was introduced before ES6 to disable very old and dangerous semantics in the code. We will see them when we talk about, for instance, variables. Okay? Because I told you, it was designed in 10 days, so many things were left for the future. Okay? Like I declare a variable without any keyword, and so what's the scope? Does it give an error if I use a second variable with the same name, and so on? I mean, all these things were left, let's say, a little bit for the future when JavaScript was initially developed, and JavaScript was very permissive, and it also means that it's very difficult to catch some kind of errors. Okay? And so over time, people realized that it was better to avoid certain ways of writing JavaScript and maybe disable them directly at the level of the execution environment. Okay, so this strict mode tells the execution environment to stop the code if it finds something which is not supported, again, in strict mode. Okay, and typically leads to problem. And we will not write code which is not supported in strict mode because it is too dangerous, too messy, and so on. Okay, execution environments. Well, there are the ones in the browser. There are the ones that can be run on server and as command line interface. That basically means Node.js in different flavors. And there is something which is nice for understanding. We will use one just today, just for experimenting, but just to show you what you can do. Okay, this Python tutor. Python tutor is just a web application, actually. Everything is a web application where you can write some code, okay, and run it. And the nice thing is that you click and it gives you a view of what's happening. Okay, we don't care what's written there now. Okay, just give you a view of what's happening inside the execution environment. Okay. And it's nice in the beginning because you don't know the language and you want to visualize what's happening in the code. Okay? But it's just a tool for teaching, okay? Not for executing real code. Okay. Good. So that's a screenshot of the JavaScript tutor with some more complex code. Like it shows you, the vector in the memory, what's contained in every cell in the vector, and so on. Okay? So it's very good for visualizing code, especially simple code when you start working on code, on new code. Okay, there is also a JavaScript console. Actually, this is integrated in all browsers, just to show you. I mean, I can open it here. Okay, I just did the right click and inspect, but it's also somewhere here in the menu. I never remember where. I think more tools. Yes, web developer tools. Okay. There's a JavaScript console, a lot of warnings. Okay, let's clean up. Okay, again, you can program here. Okay, actually, not really program, but you can code things. But I mean, actually, this is the execution environment inside the browser. Differently from the Python tutor, here you can interact with the browser and with the content of the page and so on. And that is what we are going to do later in this course. Okay? Write JavaScript code that interacts with the browser window. Okay? But just for starting, it's another way in which you can type some code and see the result of this JavaScript code. Okay, and this is not a special version of the browser. You have it on your computers for sure. Any version, any operating system, and so on. I mean, just not on the mobiles, because the mobiles are resource constrained, so typically they don't have a debugger, also typing is so difficult, okay? But desktop versions, all of them have a JavaScript console and actually a developer environment where you can check what's happening inside the client part of the application, okay? I showed you Firefox, you can do it in Chrome or Safari and so on, okay? Okay, so let's talk more in details about the JavaScript. JavaScript is quite peculiar because it was not born to write a very big program like C, C++, Java, and so on, but it was born to write some code into a browser. So in JavaScript, one file means one JavaScript program. Okay? Quite different from other languages. Why? Because actually the page is just one, so I just need one place to put the code. Okay? This is a game. Think 10 days to develop everything. Okay? And then, of course, over time things evolved. So nowadays we don't have to write everything into a single JavaScript file. Otherwise, it's very limiting. Okay, as long as when the application grows in size, it becomes very, very limiting. So the way in which different files and programs communicate is the global state. You know that the state, global variables, global state is something which is typically regarded as bad in programming because it's so easy to have clashes between names of the variables and so on. But at a certain point, this module mechanism was introduced, so we don't really need to rely on this global state that can cause so many problems. JavaScript is an interpreted language. Okay, it's like Python. Maybe many of you know Python. The file, the content of the file is entirely parsed. So the interpreter starts from beginning to end, read the file, and then starts executing it. Okay. So this also means that if there is a syntax error, it is detected before starting the execution. Okay? This is valid both outside and inside the browser. Okay, but I mean, when a program works, we don't have errors, so execution starts and then we can have runtime errors. And of course, it relies on a standard library as any other language, but when it's needed, we will discuss it. JavaScript is written in Unicode. And do not abuse means, okay, you can write the emoticons, you can write strange characters, Chinese characters. It's not forbidden, but just try to not to overuse them, okay? Because, you never know what might happen, okay? Because, for instance, some characters, very special characters may occupy more than one position in the vector, in the string, and so on. I mean, at least for variable names and these kind of things, use English. The course is in English, is fine. Okay, no strange characters and so on. Semicolons are not mandatory, automatically inserted. Maybe I should say before, it's more like JavaScript has a syntax which is like C in many ways. Okay, so you know C probably, at least I hope you saw it at least once. There are statements and they are terminated with a semicolon. Well, in JavaScript you can use it, but it's not mandatory, and this is again an issue that is up for debate in the JavaScript community. People like semicolon, others don't. Okay, it's case sensitive like C. You have the same comment as C. Identifier more or less like C. Okay, you can start with the underscore and the dollar. Some reserved words, as in any language, like for, in, of, if, then, else. No, then is not present anyway. I mean, C-like syntax. Okay. Okay. Semicolon, argument of debate. I mean, do what you think it is good for you. Okay. If you think it's more clear, you put the semicolon. If you think it's you can do without, for us it's fine. Okay. The important thing is that you remember that sometimes it's mandatory to insert. Okay. So it's a bit tricky. Okay. So if you want to always be safe, always use it. Okay. Whenever you finish an instruction, because JavaScript goes on the next line, and if it can be concatenated to the previous one, it does. Always does. Okay. Sometimes it's inserted automatically, and really bad behavior, but this is JavaScript. We need to get used to this. For instance, when the typical case, the return. You write, you like that JavaScript concatenates everything. At a certain point, you write return, next line something, and the next line is not taken, differently from all the other cases. Anyway, we will encounter these things when we program a little bit in JavaScript. Okay, so if you want, there are guidelines. For instance, Google-style guides. The guide is good in this sense. We try to follow it, and it means we always use the semicolon. Okay, that is the safest choice. Strict mode, you see, it's ES5, not ES6, so the version before the one we are targeting. Is really simple to use. You just put a string, quotation marks, use strict, quotation mark, semicolon, again optional, but put it so it's easier to understand. And the interpreter will set it itself in strict mode. Okay? You just use it at the beginning of every file. Very simple. And this helps us a lot because it detects, the environment detects a lot of errors that otherwise would not be detected easily. Okay? This is a list, but I think it's better not to make the lecture like a telephone roster, right? Just reading slides. Try to get the important concepts here. You have the slides in any case. So let's go. Let's start from the very basic. Okay. Variables, values, types, and so on. Okay. Well, JavaScript is really special in this sense that values have a type, but variables have not a type. Okay? It's more or less like Python if you are familiar with that. Not like Java. Java is a strict typed, so when you declare a variable, you need to assign a type. Here, the variable is just a container, it's just a box, and the type, I mean, the box is not a type. The value that you put inside the box is a type. You put a number, the type is a number. You put a string, the type is a string. Okay? And so that's the structure of the types for the values in JavaScript. So you have 5 primitive values. So 2 are very special, null and undefined. Undefined, you saw it before in the JavaScript console of the browser, but it's very important, very frequent in JavaScript. And then you have 3 types, string and number, and Boolean. Okay, so there is explicit type Boolean in JavaScript. And there is string, there is no character, okay, no type character, because a character is simply a string with one character. Okay, and then there are complex types. That basically everything is an object in JavaScript, but there are 2 special objects, which are arrays and functions. Okay, plus everything we will define ourselves. Okay, so we can define objects by ourselves. Okay, you think Boolean, fine, very, very easy. No, not really, because in JavaScript, a lot of things evaluate like false, and a lot of other things evaluate like true, and maybe sometimes it's not like you expect. Okay, you see the false values, 0, easy to guess. -0, maybe a little less easy. Not a number, undefined, okay, null, and the empty string. The empty string evaluates to false, okay? And this is somehow convenient, okay? Because when you write instructions, if something, or even without the if, with the question mark, so it's convenient, okay? But remember that the empty array is not false, it's true, like the empty object, and like number which is not 0, and like strings, okay, regardless of the content. You can do comparisons. There are 2 ways of doing comparisons, for equality. Let's say the traditional one done in many interpreted languages, where types are converted automatically, and so if there is a string containing the number 3, so the character 3, and the number 3 on the other side, the double equal says actually they are the same, so evaluates to true. The triple equal says no, because the triple equal also check if the type of the values are the same. Okay, it's something that can be found also in other languages anyway. Numbers, okay, there are no integer and reals. Everything is a number. We want to have an integer number, but we don't have the fractional part. That's all. Okay. Automatic conversion and so on, and there's a big integer, but we don't really care. Special values, undefined. Undefined is the value that every variable has when it's not initialized. So you can declare a variable without initializing it, but it has a value. Actually, for JavaScript, the value is undefined. It's not like in C, there's a random content. Okay, it's undefined. Null, it's just another type that sometimes is convenient to have. Okay, those are called nullish values, and not a number is what comes out from invalid operations. Okay, like you parse a number and there's no number that can be converted from the string. Okay. Okay, variables and references, they refer to a value. How to declare a variable? Okay, the first thing I tried to do before in the Python tutor, also in the browser console. Well, there are 3 different ways of declaring a variable. There are 3 different keywords. Okay, let, const, and var. Okay, let a equal to 5. Here we didn't put the semicolon. Previously we did, but doesn't change that much. Just to give you some examples. Const b 6, var c 7. So what's the difference? Well, actually, the difference, with const it's easy to guess, right? You cannot reassign the value. Let and var, well, the difference is how they are scoped. So where is the variable visible in the code? Okay, and not in strict mode. It will be, I think, in next slide. You can even declare variables without a keyword before. Okay, just write a equal to 8. Okay, it works. You already declare it with the let. Very messy, right? So that's why we say try to use this strict mode, okay? Because otherwise it's so easy to mistype a variable, things doesn't work anymore, you don't know why, and you just mistype the name of a variable which overrides the content of another and so on, okay? So basically, just use the first two, let a const, okay? Of course, you cannot reassign a value to a const. You cannot redeclare it, so reasonably safe. If you redeclare it, you discover it when you start running the application because it's a syntax error, okay? Even before running the code. The scope is the block, hoisting we'll see in a minute. Var, unfortunately, can be reassigned. No, sorry, not unfortunately. That's a variable, so for sure it can be reassigned. But unfortunately, it can be redeclared. Var A and then var A again, and the interpreter says nothing. Okay. And the scope is not the block but the function, or the global scope if you have not a function around the variable. And there is this particular behavior called hoisting. So you declare it at a certain point, and for the interpreter it's like it's declared in the beginning of the file. Very confusing, right? And even more, no keywords, so no let const var can be reassigned, of course. Of course, it doesn't mean nothing redeclaring because you're not declaring anything, you're just using it. Scope is always global, hoisting yes, but luckily it's forbidden in strict mode. So try never use this. Okay? So just let a const. Okay? Let's just see an example. Let A1 const B2, let's see true, let A5, of course it's a syntax error, it's already declared, nothing special, right? Use strict, okay? Use strict again. We create a new scope, which is typically not done in this way in JavaScript, but let's say, I mean, for this lecture, let's do it this way. Let A5 is fine, okay? It's like in C or in Java, whatever. You open new scope, you can redeclare, you can reuse the name, but I mean, the name outside the scope cannot be accessed anymore, okay? Because you are shadowing it, okay? Okay, so that's how the let works. So more or less it works as we expect in other programming languages. So that's why we say use let if necessary to declare a variable that needs to be changed. Hoisting, that's that behavior that we saw before. Let A1, okay, console log is like the print function of JavaScript, okay? Console.log. So it prints something in the console. Just see it here, like console log A. Okay, it prints 1. It's a print, nothing special, really nothing special. Okay, so you do console log 1. Okay, console log A prints 1. Console log B. That's a problem, okay? It's not a syntax error. Only when you run the code, it will say something, reference error, B is not defined, okay? Console log C. C is undefined. Why? Because if you look later in the code, you see this var C, okay, has been declared later in the code. But it exists from the beginning of the code. That's really confusing. That's what is called hoisting. Okay? And that's why we don't want to use this var. Okay? Again, here I tell you, if I see a var in the project, in your code, I will say, why did you use var? Okay? I mean, we say not to use it. There's no reason to use var in your code, really. So, it's really, I cannot find a reason why you should use var in your code, okay? Unless, again, it's been suggested by AI, it's been, etc., etc. Okay, so, I mean, like it's not capital sin, it means, probably I will not fail the exam, but I start to be in suspicious mode myself, right? Okay, so try not to put me in suspicious mode in the beginning, okay, when I start discussing the project with you, okay? And then, well, you see the code, there's B again is not available here because let has the scope inside the curly brackets, okay? So it doesn't exist outside the curly brackets. While C, the var C, of course it existed before and of course also after, okay? So this is the first thing we need to be careful about in JavaScript. Okay, so stop here for the variables. Typically a very boring topic, but you already saw something, say, special in JavaScript. Operators, we are not going to make a list here. I mean, we just focus on the important ones. There are all the C kind of C-style operators available. Okay, so plus, minus, plus, equal, etc. All this kind of stuff that you're used to use in C. Okay, even bitwise operation, we never used it in JavaScript, honestly. The strict equal, the triple equal, we already saw it. It checks that the type is the same in addition to the value. Okay, and there is also the strict not equal, so the exclamation mark equal equal. Okay, so it checks if they are different. If they are the same but not the same type or not equal, or of course if they are just different types. Okay, so string 3 and number 3 are different for the triple, the exclamation mark double equal. Okay, comparing objects. You can compare anything in JavaScript. And in JavaScript, any variable contains any type. So you can have a variable that contains, we say object, actually it's a reference to an object. Like it's a reference to array, it's a reference to, what was the third? The array and a function. Okay, but functions are, comparing functions doesn't make that much sense, right? You might think that comparing objects or arrays can be done, and actually you are comparing references. It's like comparing pointers in C. Okay, it can be done, but actually you are just checking if the value points to the same piece of memory. Okay, and that's the same behavior here in JavaScript. Of course, greater than and so on doesn't make that sense. JavaScript has automatic conversion. This is the flow of the automatic conversion. But I would say maybe let's try not to use these strange expressions to do and let JavaScript do automatic conversion, because you never know what's going to happen. And also you make the code much more explicit if you do conversion explicitly, and if you do manual conversion and you know what is happening, okay? Because you see that you can convert a string to a number also in these two ways, which are very peculiar, right? Plus string or string minus 0, okay? This is really JavaScript style, bad style, I would say. Try to avoid it, because you're forcing, you are exploiting a sort of implicit behavior of the JavaScript interpreter. Okay, it's very difficult to say. I mean, plus s, it's a string. Why you should put a plus? What does it mean? String plus nothing. Okay, it's just a way to convert it. So if you really need to do conversion, there are functions in the standard library, very explicit, parse int, parse float, parse, etc. And of course, you give a string and they give you a number. And maybe they give you not a number in case, and so on. Okay? And there is a behavior which is specified in the guidelines, in the specification, like a Mozilla Developer Network and so on. Okay? Yes. Operators, you can use and, or, not, all this stuff, standard stuff in comparison, ifs, expressions, and so on. Okay? Okay, we focus only on the peculiarities of JavaScript. Like you see these double bars, which are typically the logical OR. You have if something or something else, double bar, like C, like the C language. But you can use it also in a more compact way. JavaScript likes to compact the code, okay? And sometimes to make code a little bit difficult to understand, I must admit. But if you write a code like this, A double bar B, that means if A, then A, else B, okay? And A is evaluated as we saw before, if it's truthy or falsy, okay? So the empty string is not empty string, so it might be difficult in the beginning, but then you might find it useful for writing compact code, and in a certain sense also easy to read code once you know how to read it. Okay, so we will point out these things when they are encountered during the course. There's also the double and, okay, that has some sort of similar behavior. Of course, there are the standard library functions, math stuff, control structure, if else, yeah, that's the else, sorry, before I said something wrong. I didn't remember. If else, switch, case, break, and so on, okay? No, there is no then, sorry, I'm becoming old. The condition is evaluated in terms of truthy or falsy. So there's this implicit conversion to Boolean. Okay? So if you put an empty string there, okay, it means it's evaluated here, as we wrote here. Where was it? Okay? Empty string, it's false. It's like putting 0. It's like putting false. Okay? Just remember this. There is this implicit conversion also in the condition. Okay? Switch may also be a string, okay, but I mean, this is really peculiar. For statement, you can use the traditional C style for statement, initialization, condition, increment. Okay, but you will see, I mean, we will almost never use this syntax because there are different ways of using the for in JavaScript. Okay, when you have arrays or we have objects to enumerate all the elements of the arrays and objects. Okay, so this is really basic, just for starting. Do while, and so on. Okay, you may use break, continue, etc. Special for statement, for variable in object. So with the in, which is a reserved keyword, in JavaScript you can enumerate the properties of an object. Okay? We didn't see object yet, but think about think an object as a list of properties with some values. Okay? As in many other languages. For variable of iterable statement. Okay? This is the way to iterate over an array in JavaScript. For a of And here we put the array explicitly because it's easier, okay? Just to make it explicit, it's an array, okay? So if you do console log A, this cycles over the array, prints 4, 7, and so on. It works with any iterable, including strings, even though we didn't talk about strings yet, okay? Strings are iterated character by character, okay? So the message here is, remember, you need to do a for. Either you do I0, I less than n, I plus plus, so C style, or better, for off. Okay? For off and not for in, which is another meaning. And then there are other methods, because everything in JavaScript is an object. Arrays are objects, so arrays have methods. Okay? Like functions will have methods, like your own objects will have methods, and so on. Okay? But later. We have exceptions in JavaScript. Try, catch, finally. Throw to throw exceptions. Okay? And this is not because I really want you to use exceptions to handle return values and so on, but because at a certain point we will need to handle exceptions, okay? Well, at least handle, use the catch, because when we talk about promises in 2-3 lectures, when you have a rejected promise, you use a wait and you use syntax, and it throws something, so you want to catch it, and you need to know that the catch exists and can be used in JavaScript. Okay, arrays. Oops. Arrays are quite rich in JavaScript, and arrays don't need to be of the same type. But I mean, there are an array of boxes. We say there are no types in JavaScript, right? So types for the boxes. There are just types for the values. So you can have like an ordered collection of elements where you can put any value. Okay? The syntax is very simple. The square brackets, as you saw in many other languages. You have a very handy property that's dot length that tells you how long it is. So it's not like C where you need to care about the length by yourself with external variables and so on. And there are a set of methods available in JavaScript to manipulate array. Okay? We will distinguish between them because some of them modify the array, some of them return a new array. Creating an array is very simple. Open, closed square brackets, like Python, for instance, if you are familiar with that. You can initialize the array directly when you declare it. And note also there are methods that can be used to do the same. Okay? Array is a predefined object in the standard JavaScript library, like object and like function. Okay? Anyway, not to make things too boring, we'll try to see them when we need them. Okay? This is the representation in the Python tutor of what's happening when you run this code. Okay? So it's a visualization of what's happening in the interpreter when you run this code. So the array is just a set of boxes that have some value inside. And value can be any type, as we said before. Okay? 5 primitive types, references to arrays, functions, and any other custom object. Okay? So this is very handy to visualize what's happening. Okay, how do you add an element to an array? Well, actually this is handled automatically by the interpreter. So you can just define an index and assign a value. Okay? After the array exists, of course. Or you can use methods provided by the array. For instance, there is this push very common to add at the end. Okay? Just as a reference, this slide tells you there are methods to add and remove from the end and from the beginning of the array. Okay? How do you copy an array? So what's happening here? Let v empty, so A8 alias equal to v. What did I copy? Did I copy the reference? Did I copy the whole vector, the whole array? The reference, yes. So if you are unsure, copy paste this stuff in the Python tutor. I did a spoiler. I went on the next slide. Anyway, just to see how it works, you go to the Python tutor website. Let's close this. I mean, we are not writing anything new, just copy pasting from the slides. Okay? Visualize, and you see what happens. Okay? So you see the alias points to the same array. So if you have any doubts in the beginning, let's say for the first 2-3 lectures, just try it with the Python tutor. It gives you an idea what's happening. I mean, the correct idea what's happening. Okay? Which is actually what is reported in the slide. So the alias, we named it alias, is just a reference to the same array in the memory of the JavaScript interpreter. Okay? It's like a second pointer to the same area of the memory. Okay? Like in C, you copy a pointer, you have a second copy of the pointer. The memory is always the same. Okay, or you want a new array, you need to find another way to create a second array. Either you do it yourself for I equal to 0, I less than, etc. I mean, C style. Or maybe there is some predefined function in the JavaScript library that does it for you. Okay? Typically, second case is very frequent, especially for very frequent operations like create a new array, copy an array, create a new object, copy an object, and so on. Okay? So this array from basically creates a new array. It's something available in the standard library. And you see it's a new array here, okay? And also because if you want to assign something to copy, and then you print from V, you will see that one is changed and the other is not, okay? If it's an alias, of course, either you print from the alias or from V, and the result is the same. Note it creates a shallow copy, so it creates only the first level. If you have references, it just copies references. Okay, so in a more complex, it's not here, it's then in the second block of slides with the objects. But if you have reference to other arrays, it just copies the reference, so it doesn't duplicate all the arrays which are pointed from that array. Okay, so that means shallow copy. Okay, I hope it's not my computer, but there's always a surprise. Almost time to end, but I mean, we still have some time. Okay, not so much to see. Okay, so arrays. This is the summary. 4 with a semicolon, I mean a very traditional one that we will not see almost anywhere here, okay? And then there are iterators, but we will come back later to this because it's more functional style. I'm very much used. I'm not saying we are not going to use. We are going to use them a lot, but I mean it's more convenient to discuss them later in the course. There are a lot of array methods here that you can see. Of course, there is a sort and all this kind of stuff that you expect in a good programming language, okay? Even though we say the not so good in the beginning. But, I mean, JavaScript is, I mean, nowadays is quite good, I would say. So, why we are putting all these methods here? I mean, just to give you a starting point. I know, nowadays you go to ChatGPT and ask, and they will tell you. You consume a lot of resources, okay? Not good for the environment. Anyway, jokes apart, I mean, you want to have some starting point. Okay, you want to play with something. This is probably the best thing where you can start from. Okay, other nice things of the JavaScript language. The structuring assignment. You can assign more than one value at a time. Okay, you can assign one vector to another, and basically JavaScript assigns the first position to the first position, second position to the second position. Very convenient. Like here, x, y, and you can swap. Okay, but not just swap. I mean, swapping is just a very toy example. But you will discover that function can return only one value, which is very inconvenient. But if you can return arrays and objects, and especially assign them in this way, you compact the code a lot without sacrificing the readability, because it's quite easy to read, right? X and y equal to this function that takes other parameters and give you the x and y, okay? And this takes advantage of this destructuring assignment. So basically, inside the function, you return an array, and the array is assigned position per position to what you write here on the left. Okay, so something is very convenient here. Even more, there is this spread operator, 3 dots, dot, dot, dot. Okay, basically automatically splits the arrays in single values, or it does the opposite as well. Okay, so here it spreads the content of parts, which is an array, in single elements. Okay? Or it compacts the content of an array into a single element, which of course becomes an array. Okay? Very convenient. Think about how much code you should write in a programming language like C to achieve this behavior. Okay? You define a new vector y, and you do a for, and you scan it from the second position, and so on. You assign it, and so on. Just one line, 3 dots, and the JavaScript interpreter does everything for you. Very convenient when you want to isolate, for instance, one element of the array, okay, and compact the rest in the other elements, in the other another vector, sorry. Or you want to spread, okay, into a vector, and that's why it's called the spread. Okay, so works left and right side of the assignment, both ways. This is ES6, okay, so still the version of JavaScript that we are targeting, 11 years old. Okay, so the spread is very convenient also to copy an array. You open and close the square bracket, you spread the old array, and this creates a new array. Okay? Very, very frequent idiom. Okay? Without writing array from, array of, and so on. What's the difference from and of? You can see the difference? From takes an array, of takes a number of parameters and make them as an array, single array. You're just curious, how do I know this? Of course, there's ChatGPT, but leave it alone. You go to the Mozilla Developer Network. I didn't. Let's Google così. So I make it big. Mozilla. It's one of the resources I put on the slides that we saw before. Mozilla Developer Network, also called MDN. Okay? You write, I think here, array. Okay? So array from. Okay? What's the specification? Creates a new shallow copied array from an iterable of array-like objects. Okay? And there are also examples, you can even run them. Okay? array, these are even too complex. Okay? 1, 2, 3, and oops. Yes, bracket is missing. 1, 2, 3 creates a new array. Okay? But it wants an array. Okay? Of it wants a list of parameters. Okay? So that's why we have to put the spread, because the spread creates a list of parameters. Okay. Was here. Okay. Almost done. Just a few more words about strings, but strings are very simple in JavaScript. They are basically arrays, but immutable arrays. Okay, you cannot write things into a string. Okay, it's not really arrays, but let's say for this lecture, arrays is fine. So it's not like C. I can take the second character and change the second character. I want to change something into a string. I need to create a new string. Nothing else can be done. Okay? Zero-based indexing, you can access single elements. So if you want to second character, index is number 1 because it starts from 0. You can use the single or double quotes. Okay, just be careful. Later on we will talk about JSON. Only the double quotes can be used, but JSON is not JavaScript. Okay, that is just another thing. Remember, there's no special type for the single character, so use a string with a single character when you need it. Sometimes you will need it, so I mean, no worry, just use a string with a single character. Since they are immutable, every method, every function that deals with string always return a new string because it cannot modify strings. Okay? So like S1 plus S2 plus concatenate the strings returns a new string. S.length, like with the arrays, gives you the length of the string. Okay, in terms of characters, so be careful of all we said about Unicode and so on. Okay? Note it's a property, it's not a method, so you don't need to call it, so no brackets. Okay, we will talk about the functions in next lecture. Plenty of methods here as well, just a starting point. Probably most common trim to cut the spaces at the end, concat to add strings, substring, and things like that. Okay, just be careful. Strings are a sequence of 16-bit elements, code units, but unfortunately Unicode nowadays has more than 65,000 characters. Okay, so when you need to deal with them, it's more problematic. So just be careful. I mean, I would say for this course, try to avoid it, and then if you really need to use it, I mean, make sure that you handle all the cases correctly. Okay, standard library should work more or less, but for instance, that's not here, but the length, okay, with Unicode might not be always exact because of this issue of some character that takes 2 positions. Okay? Anyway, last thing for today. Last way of representing strings. There is even a third way of representing string in JavaScript. We say the double quotes, single quotes, and there is this backtick. Okay? It's not a vertical quote, it's just it's a slope, okay? It's a special character. You don't find it on the Italian keyboard, unfortunately. It's on the English keyboard. But there are some combinations of keys that you can press to make the backtick. Or just go online and copy-paste the backtick somewhere, from the slides, for instance. Okay? If you define this thing in this way, you can embed JavaScript expressions with this syntax, $ and curly brackets. And this is very convenient because it basically means you can write a string and put the value of a variable inside the string without writing plus the variable plus and so on, concatenate everything together and so on. Very convenient for this reason. Okay? So it's like hello, dollar, curly bracket, name. Name is a variable. Remember, let or const, even const in this example works. And the string will be hello with the space here. And this is something that needs to be evaluated as a JavaScript code. Okay? Single variable is evaluated with its value. Okay? Very simple. It's a string. Okay? If you put a number, this number will be automatically converted to a string. Okay? Because JavaScript has this automatic conversion mechanism built inside. Okay? Very useful, very quick for formatting, and also very convenient because it may span multiple lines. Okay? While if you have the quotes, you need to have the backslash to go to the new lines. Well, just the technical stuff. Okay? I would say for today it's all. Okay? Just play a little bit with this Python tutor. Okay? If you're curious about JavaScript, you write code there. Very easy to execute, okay? Just a little bit of advertising, but you cannot do anything. I mean, nothing is for free. And you can understand how arrays work. Okay, next lecture, Thursday, we will continue with the next set of slides, which is already online. Function, objects, and then functions, okay? Are there any questions? So, tomorrow, no lab. I will delete the slots from the online calendar. Okay? And we will meet again on Thursday, 8:30 a.m. in this room. Okay? No questions. So, thank you and see you Thursday. Thursday.